The final dump is live, and it was a real dump of a final game of the regular season for the Green Bay Packers. They fall to the Detroit Lions. We will recap all of it, the very little good, certainly all the bad, what it means going forward, and some news from Monday's press conferences as well. It is the post-Week 18 edition of the Final Dump.
News dump.
News dump, yay!
News dump.
I mean, that's kind of a loaded question.
It's a landslide!
It's the Final Dump, presented by Game On Wisconsin. That is right. This is the Final Dump. I'm Brendan Dworzinski. He's Matt Freilich. I'm the one who yells a lot. He's the attractive one. Here with you for the next hour to talk all about the miserable loss for the Green Bay Packers to the Detroit Lions to end, maybe mercifully, the 2022 NFL season for Green Bay. They end the year at 8-9 and miss the playoffs for the first time since 2018. We're going to get to every element of this game. As I said at the top, very little good to get to from this game. Certainly a lot of bad, a lot of frustrating, a lot of just downright maddening. We'll get to some of the specifics, why this team can't score against Detroit, one of the worst defenses, in the entire NFL, why they scored, 25 points over 2 games this season. We'll get to all the details, plus sounds like Joe Barry is coming back for 2023 as well. At least that's the initial indication from Matt LaFleur. Matt, I'm not going to lie. I was not horribly upset at the end of the game on Sunday night because I sort of felt like, man, this game included Packers players shoving trainers and slapping dudes during timeouts and just complete nonsense to the point where I thought, I don't even have anything to say. I don't even know what to feel, what emotions to let out. I don't know if I'm sad or mad or frustrated or what. It doesn't feel good, though. I know that for certain. Whatever the specific emotion is, it's not a good one after the way the season ended.
Yeah, always tough to pinpoint, emotions after a loss or even a gut-wrenching one, or just especially when the season comes to culmination. It's always difficult, unless it ends in winning a Super Bowl. It's obviously a completely different 180 on emotions. But I would say, yeah, I wasn't. I mean, we've definitely gone through worse as Packer fans. Even in the last, like you said, we haven't made the playoffs. It was the first time since 2018. But even in that stretch of making the playoffs, we've had some more gut-wrenching and emotional, impactful endings to a season. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of didn't really digest all of the dumb stuff they did during the game until probably, I would say, this morning, on Monday morning. After the game was kind of like shit. Everything was really based around Rodgers. I waited until, and we'll get to those later, I waited until this morning to actually even listen and watch the LaFleur and Rodgers press conference, just because I didn't really want to dive into that as much last night. I really tried to avoid it as much as possible, and it was late. So, but ultimately, yeah, I mean, it's just my feelings too. Like you're saying, it's just based off of how the players acted during the game that didn't contribute to football. Mine was more or less just damn, that four game run was it was pretty cool and all, but they really kind of found their level, right? Water kind of finds its level, and that's kind of what this game ended up being, is just the culmination of what the entire year really, what they really look like, their common denominator, which puts a bad taste in your mouth going into the next season.
Yeah, and I think that's where I want to start, because I agree with you 1,000,000,000% that I don't want to completely eliminate what the previous 4 weeks had been. Beating the Bears and beating the Rams and the Dolphins and the win over the Vikings felt incredible. I don't know any Packers fan who didn't at least feel some sort of joy sticking it to Minnesota, especially a Minnesota team that's won a bunch of games, but who, the stats flesh out, probably are not really a great team this year. I mean, it was fun. It was a blast. It felt like a playoff run for the last 4 weeks, because to a degree it was. Had the Packers lost any of those games since the game against the Bears all the way through week 18, the season was over from that point. And then it was just talking about draft position and, well, maybe we're going to see Jordan Love at some point. So I don't want to discount what that meant and what that was like and how much fun it was to actually get to root for a team that was building momentum and was playing pretty well defensively. I gave the stat last week on the show that over that 4-week stretch, the 4-game winning streak, Packers defense was only giving up 17 points a game, and they were actually playing pretty well. And the offense was slowly but surely getting into a little bit of a rhythm. And then every single demon from all season came out in week 18. It felt so much to me, Matt, like the losses from, the Giants game, the Jets, or the Commanders game, the first Lions game, all those just grating midseason losses. It felt like so many of those where the offense looks okay early in the game, but cannot take advantage and squanders a bunch of opportunities that they just cannot figure out, what is it going to take to get into the end zone or to call a decent play on the goal line, or not to put all the blame on the play calling, to actually execute on the goal line and get the ball in the end zone, squandering opportunities, let them back into the game at halftime. On Sunday, it was the personal foul against Rasul Douglas. There's, the touching the ball thing. I know that got all the attention, but that they were calling timeout. That wasn't going to do anything if they had just let it go. You can't slap a dude, man. Like, that's always going to get caught and that's always going to get flagged. So that was dumb. You let the Lions kick an easy field goal, cuts into it. And then we had the third quarter drive that takes 19 years off the clock, that demoralizes the defense and wears them down. Offense can't get into enough of a rhythm the rest of the way, and they end up losing. I mean, we saw that same loss over and over. And to a point about the defense again, too, it's amazing how much better a defense looks when they're forcing a bunch of turnovers, right? And when they're intercepting Kirk Cousins 3 or 4 times, and when Tua Tagovailoa is potentially playing with a concussion and is throwing the ball to nobody except defenders. Like, wow, amazing that makes a defense look a whole lot better. Packers didn't take the ball away. They did turn it over. An awful interception by Rodgers, the fumble by Aaron Jones. And I knew at that moment, oh my God, I'm having flashbacks. Like, it just, everything that we talked about all year that was wrong with this team's execution, with its play calling, with its preparation, with its coaching, whatever it might end up being, it all came out at the worst possible time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's crazy to me that they, like you mentioned, all those bad losses that had happened throughout the year. It's crazy to me that like this would, they could how could it possibly happen again when it's a win and get in scenario? Like, that's the thing to me, is like, that's the part that really, really hurts, is like, okay, you control your destiny. We talk about that all the time. Sports fans, coaches, Rodgers has talked about it, LaFleur's talked about it, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, all you had to do was just execute. Like, it didn't even have to be a game like Minnesota. It could have been a shit fest like the Dolphins game. It could have been, a game like the Rams. Like, there's all these games that have happened over the last month that like you could have replicated that, or even just 80% of that production. Like, but instead you went back to all these negative habits. And there's just, like you mentioned the defensive stuff. Like, I was really trying to manifest a defensive big play. Like, every time like they got the ball back, I think it was in like the second quarter, I was telling Andrew next to me, I'm like, hey, it's gonna be a big play this drive. Well, it's not a big play. Going to be a big play this drive. Then it's that long, 12 play drive, and then in the third quarter, 13 play drive. Like, it's like, okay, well, I'm just not making it. And it's like, you could kind of see like throughout the game where it was just like they weren't playing with that same pizzazz, that aggressiveness that they did, especially in the Minnesota game. That's been talked about quite a bit today on my timeline, and I think just nationally, is just like they reverted back to the old ways of not pressing guys, not contesting guys. The real frustrating play that I saw, just a small little caveat here, and we'll get back to it, is just like Darnell Savage was having such a good game, and all of a sudden they show the replay of him following St. Brown in the slot, and he's just like dogging it across the line when he puts him in motion. They run a little 10-yard out. It's like, well, you're never going to cover that if you don't get back in center in front of him. Like, it's never gonna work that way. Just like small things like that, like just lacking the intensity to want to jam a guy, get up on a line, and make a play. Like, that's what really sucks to me. And it's just, you don't have a lot of momentum to go into the offseason. If they would have played a tough, aggressive game like Minnesota and then lost, I'd feel a lot better today than I did last night.
It's just tough to get beaten by Jared Goff's had a good year, and I don't want to say, oh, he's just a bum, he's a joke, he's at a good year. They put the stat up on the broadcast, his passer rating, for whatever that's worth, over the last 8 weeks or whatever it was, is the best in the NFL. I mean, he's played really well. We also know that he doesn't do all that well under pressure. And what did the Packers do? They generated 2 total pressures between their edge rushers on Sunday. We know that he doesn't throw the ball well in the cold in general. I mean, he outplayed Aaron Rodgers for most of the game. Rodgers had a couple of throws that were great. The one to the deep ball that Watson did end up catching, great throw. The one, well, in fact, 2 deep balls that he ended up catching were good throws. The one to Romeo Doubs was a perfect throw. That was the best throw of the entire freaking game, and it hits Doubs right in the forearm and goes incomplete. I mean, it was the little things. It's the attention to detail. We'll get to discipline specifically in just a moment, but I mean, you could go point to any quarter of the game, Matt, and see things that went wrong that shouldn't have gone wrong. You can go and point to plays that should have been made. The one that still stands out to me was in the first half. I want to say it was the second quarter, but I might be mistaken here. It might have been the first quarter. Rodgers needs some help. He's rolling out to his right. A.J. Dillon is waiting about 4 yards down the field, 1 yard in front of the sticks. And Rodgers had to, he had to get rid of it, just to dump it off. Dillon can't hang on to it. And, in the moment, it's okay, well, that sucks. But then they couldn't convert on 3rd down and 5. Then they ended up having to kick the field goal instead of being able to get a touchdown in that situation. If Dillon catches that ball, turns it up, gets the first down, there's no guarantee the Packers get in the end zone. We know how god-awful the offense has been inside the 10-yard line, certainly on the goal line all year. But you get another chance at it, or you get an expanded group of chances at it. Instead, you end up not getting those 4 to, and I haven't looked back at the tape at how much room he may have had to turn up and run with, but, anywhere from 4 to 8 yards, essentially. Instead of getting that, you end up certainly getting 3 points instead of a chance at a touchdown. Packers had so many chances to put this game away. And then again, the dumb stuff with the turnover, the Jones fumble, the penalties, one in the first half, one in the second half. I mean, it's just the little things here and there. The Doubs drop, and I don't even know if they officially credited that as a drop, but it was a perfect frozen rope of a throw. They hit him right in the forearm. Like, I know he's a rookie, but this is also week 18 of your rookie season. So you're not really a rookie at that point. I'm not trying to put this all on Romeo Doubs. I'm not trying to put this all on A.J. Dillon because it's not on any one person. I don't think it's all on Aaron Rodgers, even though he wasn't very good in the game overall, aside from a few throws here and there. I don't think there's any one person, any one entity, any one aspect to blame. But it's, to me, if the question is what stands out the most, it's the fact that everything went wrong. I don't want to jump into, well, they weren't prepared, and certainly not they didn't want it enough stuff, because I think that's mostly nonsense, but it felt a little unprepared. Like, all that momentum you'd been playing with, all that intensity, all the good vibes you'd had the last 4 weeks, there's none of that in this game. Absolutely none. Other than the deep ball catch by Watson early on. I don't know how much we felt of that the entire game.
No, I totally agree with you. And I was thinking just, like you mentioned, I think I was trying to, going through the prep notes that you sent over earlier, and I'm like trying to rack my brain all day of like what went wrong. And there's just so many little things. Like, I think the A.J. Dillon one was one that I was reflecting back on before we started. It's just like, damn, like, that's a small play, but it ends up being a big play. And the Doubs one for sure was another one. It's just like those constant little things that add up. Like, you can get away with a few of those. But when a team like the Lions is playing with literally reckless abandonment, nothing to lose, and they have all the confidence in the world just because their coach is motivating, and they got a guy like Jamal Williams who's an absolute savage. Like, and the defense is a bunch of truly some nobodies, and I think they will turn into a pretty damn good defense as time evolves here. But it just sucks that it's just these small little things that you continue to shoot yourself in the foot. Like, what is it, death by 1,000 cuts? Like, that's really what it ended up being last night.
So I wanted to get to a topic that I know I have hammered over and over and over again, but it's discipline with this team, man. And it's, certain things like drops. I mean, that's eye discipline. That's a form of it. But I mean, the stupid penalties and the things like that. And some of it's play calling. And I think Aaron Rodgers' execution and the offensive execution comes down to some level of discipline as well. I think it was Jacob Morley, friend of the program, who tweeted this out. He usually does the PFF scores the morning after Packers games. He puts them out there on social media. And I believe he said that no Packer offensive lineman was graded as having an above average game on Sunday. Like, yeah, I mean, Packers are getting beat up front. They lost the game in the trenches. They certainly lost it defensively. We know that. And they lost it offensively as well in the trenches. And I know I keep hitting on the same point, and I think that a lot of moments from this game stand out, so it feels very repetitive. But, like, Quay Walker, what are you doing? You already did that this season, and I know emotions are high. I know you were checking on your former teammate from when you were in college, from Georgia. I'm sure that's tough when you're seeing, oh, man, I hope DeAndre Swift is okay. I hope he's all right. I get that. But by the same token, dude, like, You're a professional now, man. You can't be doing, pardon my language here, you can't do dumb shit like that. And I know that on Monday morning, he put his tweet thread out and said he reached out to the trainer and apologized, and he feels awful about what he did, and he just hopes he can be forgiven and knows he needs to work on this. I understand all of that. Okay. I really do. And on a human level, you have grace for people and whatever. But there's also the football level to this, man. You already got kicked out of a game this year for shoving someone who wasn't in uniform on a sideline. You've got to be more aware. And I just, like, at some point, that it's on him. Like, you can't do that. You have to know you cannot do that. But by the same token, like, LaFleur was rip shit pissed at him earlier in the year when he got tossed in Buffalo. And then he was yelling at him again, be smart, be smart. They showed that on the NBC camera. He was yelling, be smart, and pointing at his head while talking to Quay Walker. Dude, like, you're the coach. This comes down to you at some point. Rasul Douglas, right? The penalty for slapping whichever Lions blocker that was on the field goal try. I really don't think they were going to throw a flag. It didn't appear that they were going to. For him going up and touching the ball, I thought it was pretty obvious he did that because he looked to the sideline, saw LaFleur call timeout. The linesman was going to wave for it. So he was like, all right, I'm just going to go and get in their head a little bit, and I'm not going to let them snap the ball. That's fine. I mean, that's just gamesmanship. Who cares? Don't slap the dude. Like, you've been in the league for the better part of a decade, Rasul. Like, you cannot do that. And it just drives me up a wall, Matt, that we are doing this in this kind of game. Like, against Buffalo, when it felt like the season was falling apart and was, there was no chance of making the playoffs. All right, that's really bad, but that's one thing. Your season is on the line. Jobs are on the line. How do you lose focus like that? And it's coaching, it's players. I just don't understand. And at some point, that has to come down to the coaching staff, position coaches, coordinators, and certainly the head coach too.
100%. Like, the first one, like the Quay Walker one, is, to me, like, it's a bad week for that to happen. Obviously, with the true miracle that's happening with DeMar Hamlin right now, which 7 days ago we were literally probably right about this time in a recording and wondering what was going on, and we had you cut in live here and we talked about it, and it's evolved from then. But like, bad timing for it to happen then. I think if it was a player, it's probably a different conversation. If he shoves a guy like that, I don't think it's like, because like the player's trying to come in and kind of elbow him out of the way, which is normal, right? Like, you don't ever want an opponent just hovering over your teammate, whether he's injured, whether he just had a big play, whether they are former teammates. It doesn't really matter. You never want that guy, imposing his will on someone else. So I can understand why Quay Walker did it, but like, you got to be a little bit more aware of your surroundings and see that it's a trainer. It's a guy that's like a foot and a half shorter than me. I probably don't need to and he's like not in a uniform. He's all like just in an all black jumpsuit. Like, you got to be way smarter than that. Honestly, the Rasul Douglas one, I loved it. I thought that was brilliant. Like, initially I was like, what is he doing? And then when they're talking about on the broadcast, it's like, oh, they called timeout. That's why he went over. Like, I love that type of gamesmanship stuff. Like, stuff that you can get away with because you can. And like, okay, we're not going to let this guy get an attempt. We're not going to get Bagley get an attempt. We're not even going to let them get the snap off. Like, I think that stuff in sports is the best. I totally love it. But like, Rasul, you got to understand, like, not only are you walking in between these nasty offensive linemen and tight ends in between the trenches there, but you're provoking this. Like, someone is probably going to shove you, so you have to be like, hey, I'm going to be a shithead right now and slap the ball. Like, I need to understand what the repercussions are of that and not be surprised when someone shoves me from behind. At that point, you just have to laugh it off, like kind of what you saw what Jalen Ramsey did in the game before, like versus Seattle. Whether or not that hit was clean on Geno, I think it was, just bad timing. But like, he's like, whatever. Like, I was a part of a situation, but I'm not gonna, provoke it. Where DK Metcalf ended up provoking it. It's like, he's got to be smarter than that. It sucks for Quay. I saw a lot of dumb shit on Twitter last night. Like, people are like, he shouldn't be on the team next year. It's like, well, you clearly don't understand how the NFL works. They're not cutting a first-round pick after getting kicked out of 2 games. I understand it's terrible, but it's like, he's not leaving. He's had a great end of the season, I thought. Some maturity needs to happen. Obviously, he's a rookie. It's just what happens. Like, it's not excusable. He gets kicked out of 2 games or even 1 game, especially in just stuff where it's like, has nothing to do with football, essentially. It's literally you just dicking around with guys that are like more inferior to you. That kind of really irritates me. But we've seen this time and time again for Matt LaFleur teams. Like, there is no vocal leader on this team, whether it be, I feel, from the coaching staff. I don't feel like there's really one on the defense or the offense. I've thought about that for weeks and weeks and weeks. Over the last 2 years, I'm like, I don't know who that guy is. I really don't know who it is. You know, Devondre Campbell's got the captain patch. I don't see him being a vocal guy rallying the troops up. You know, Ja talks a lot, but I feel like Jair Alexander's kind of a weird brain where he's not rallying a bunch of guys around anyways. Like, it's a weird dynamic with this team. I think we've seen a lot of, you know, criticism this year. A lot of lumps have been taken from Matt LaFleur, and previous to this, the previous 3 years, he never really had that. So it's like going through some of that scrutiny and some of those hard times is I think an eye-opening thing for him. I don't know how that gets corrected, because I've kind of thought Matt LaFleur from day one, when he has first initial press conference, I'm like, this guy's a little bit nervous, a little bit gun shy, a little bit timid. I haven't really seen that change. So I don't know how that gets fixed. I don't know what happens, but yeah, like you said, it starts and stops with you, man. Like, no shit, you're upset, but at the end of the day, like, you have to correct, or at least have, you know, a vice president or an assistant coach, if you will, you know, a vice principal, to be the mean person, because that's usually what every organization has, is someone on the other sideline that they're afraid of, they're scared of, that you're never going to do that with. Maybe similar to like a Dan Campbell.
And I think for me, that's the biggest issue I have with Matt LaFleur. I like Matt LaFleur. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a smart guy. Does he have faults as a coach? Sure. I think pretty much everyone does. But you can't always be, you know, the friendly big brother coach. Like, you can't always be friends with the guys. Sometimes you have to be a hard ass. And that doesn't mean after something happens, right? Like, that's not Quay Walker shoves a trainer. Like, you can say, be smart all you want in that situation. It's over, dude. It happened. That shove came. The teaching moment was Buffalo. And in fairness, okay, and Domovsky tweeted this out after the game, nobody has been ejected twice in a season in some ungodly amount of time. Like, it just doesn't happen. So sure, you're never expecting it, but that's what coaching and teaching is you have that moment, you have that very bad moment, and you say, look, here's why this can never happen again. We are going to work with this so you are aware, and it is in your head, that this can never happen again. That clearly didn't happen. I don't think Quay Walker's a bad dude. I don't think he's like a raging lunatic. I just think that you need to be able to get that out of guys. You need to have it in everyone's brain, even veterans like Rasul Douglas. You need to have it in their brains. We cannot afford these mistakes. We cannot afford these mental lapses in this game. Being excited, being animated, being in someone's face, that is important, and that is a vital part of football to a degree. Look at how well the secondary played last week when they were getting super fired up and they were getting in Justin Jefferson's face and Adam Thielen's face last week. That's important, but you have to maintain a certain level of professionalism to a degree, and it didn't feel like there was enough of that this year. And I go back to the story in The Athletic about how, you know, LaFleur's just kind of one of the guys, and they had a great time at David Bakhtiari's wedding and all that. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad the guys like who they play for, and I'm glad that LaFleur's a good dude. But at some point, you got to lay down the law. There is a balance to strike. To me, it's the total opposite, the reverse of what the Giants had to do with Tom Coughlin before they won the Super Bowl in 2007 when they beat the 18-1 Patriots. I remember they talk all about this in the America's Game episode. And which, great, awesome series if you haven't watched it. I'm sure many people, if you're watching this show, you've probably watched America's Game, but you know what I mean. And they say, like, look, he was always a hard ass. He was always all over us. It was too much. So some of the veterans said, look, Tom, you got to throttle back at least a little bit, because you're putting us in a tough spot. We're clashing here. Throttled it back just a little bit, kept his normal Coughlin self, but throttled back a little bit. I'm not saying that Matt LaFleur gets a little more aggressive in meetings and all of a sudden the Packers are going to win the Super Bowl and, you know, beat one of the greatest teams of all time. I'm just saying that I think that's the next step for him in his development as a coach is, look, dude, you've got to be more than just friends with these guys. You've got to be able to actually coach them up. And I just feel like that's lacking right now. I do want to bring up, though, by the way, Matt, in terms of the extremely dumb stuff that we have seen over the course of the day when it pertains to Quay Walker. This is the biggest one. This from Mike Tanier of the New York Times and Football Outsiders about how he deserves a 1-year suspension from the NFL. Again, this is Mike Tanier on Twitter from the New York Times. He has exhibited a pattern of dangerous behavior that could lead to a bystander getting seriously injured during a game. That is absolutely unacceptable. Number one, the NFL suspended a sexual predator for 11 games. Quay Walker's going to not, come on. Come on. That's not going to happen. Secondly, come on. Like, even beyond the precedent, like, give me a break, dude. Come on. It's bad. He's going to get fined. If you said, hey, he's going to get suspended for a game, maybe even 2 next year because of this, honestly, I get it. A year, come on.
It's a bad take. It's a really bad take. Like he's not throwing fists. He's not, bashing people with helmets across the head. Like, he shoved 2 trainers. Now, it's not great, but yeah, that's a bad take from that guy, Mike. Not good for Mike Tanner.
No, not good whatsoever. Appreciate everyone who's chiming in the comment section on the Game On Wisconsin YouTube. We got Jazzy Boy Diehard Fishing here who says, we are not a scary team on offense no more. Never been scary on defense. We need to be more aggressive, play with more attitude. We are soft. I do generally agree with that. And I think that's what Rasul was going for, but you've got to be able to, again, there's a threshold you can't cross. And unfortunately, the Packers did cross that in terms of mental mistakes defensively. They also crossed the threshold of complete and utter patheticness offensively against Detroit in this game. But man, it wasn't just this game against Detroit. It was all season. 2 games against the Lions. One of the worst defenses in the NFL. Everyone would tell you that. Eye test, metrics, all that. One of the worst defenses in the league. 2 games, the Packers scored 25 points against them. I maybe you noticed something that I didn't notice. Maybe there is something that they were doing schematically that Aaron Glenn was dialing up that was just completely befuddling to the Packers. But I don't think they did anything special. I just don't know why this Packers team could not do anything at all against that defense for Detroit. Everyone else did almost all year, and the Packers were rendered Bears-like in 2 games.
I don't understand why the Lions specifically, it's a small sample size, 2 games, but it's a decent amount in the retrospect of an entire season. I don't know why the Lions seem to have, the Packers number when they're on defense. Aaron Glenn's got them playing well, like you mentioned. I would say some of the things that have just continued to prolong this team this entire season is decision-making. I think on short yardage, we saw that last night with the end around to Lazard, which was just so damn confusing. I don't care what screenshot you have on, it looked like they could have, Rodgers could have fallen forward. I don't care about that. Like, I don't care if there's 7 guys on the line. Like, you just need to run the ball on 4th and inches. That's just run the ball. Do not go east and west when you need literally less than a yard. That just doesn't make sense. I think the big one, though, too, is the lack of Nathaniel Hackett. Honestly, so many times during that game last night when they're settling for 3, I'm like, damn, wonder what Nathaniel's up to right now. I know he's probably enjoying his guaranteed money from the Broncos, but like, the Gold Zone used to be awesome. That used to be our stuff. And I know some of it probably is impacted quite a bit by Devontae Adams, having to, take some safety shade over the top, opens up one-on-one coverages for other guys. Rodgers doesn't have to think as much through the progression, but just some of the lack of creativity. And you see it across the league of other creative stuff. We're watching a, national championship game tonight. You see a ton of crazy college football creativity, whether it's short yardage or goal line stuff. You see a ton of it in the NFL, the copycat league that is between, the Titans or the Chiefs, for God's sakes, or the Eagles. Like, you never get that from the Packers anymore. And that's the really frustrating part, because they have the guys that can do it. They have guys that are versatile. They did line up Randall Cobb out of the backfield on that 3rd down where Rodgers thought to scramble out to the outside and, not even overthrew, had a terrible pass to A.J. Dillon. Yeah, pants are definitely on right now tonight, Todd Varney. I struggle with the fact that it's like you have to be, these are small pieces of an NFL game and an NFL, I guess, strategy going into a game. And it's previously, I think it was during the beginning of the year, Rodgers had talked about how Matt LaFleur is really good with like delegating. Stenavich gets this, or Luke Getsy got that, or Hackett would get these little pieces of the game plan, third down stuff, the first 15 plays, red zone stuff. And like, I don't know who's coming up with the red zone stuff right now, but they suck. They don't know. Like, it's not great. It's really shitty. So that's the other issue. It's like that you got to be able to score touchdowns, man. Like,
yep.
I was baffled how many times I rolled out Crosby there in 45+ yarders last night. I was surprised he only missed one of them. And it's just like, you can't be relying on Mason to hit some bombs in January weather. Like, it's just at Lambeau. It's not going to happen all the time. So there's that. And I just think the way they fixate on running the ball out of shotgun all the time. I know that's how it's established, but then you got to be able to pass it out of an RPO too. Like that's the other part. I'm like, okay, you're lining up, pony package or, two running backs, like got some split receivers, but like you can't always run it up the middle. You got to maybe toss it to the outside, throw it. Like there was no creativity, or even there was no option on any of those plays last night. It was all run. There was no wrinkle at all to take anyone off guard other than them trying to set up, a couple plays through those fake end arounds or an end around or whatever you have it. So it's a creativity. It's a small yardage stuff. It's the red zone stuff for me.
Why would you run Allen Lazard multiple times?
Don't know.
Like what logic is there to that? Like, maybe you wanted to throw them off. Maybe you wanted to, I don't know. I don't have any logic behind it. You have Christian Watson, who is the fastest player on the field, one of the hardest guys to tackle on the field. Great change of direction, athletic specimen. Get him the ball in that situation. The end around, the handoff, the sweep handoff on the first fourth down, that wasn't going to, you could have had Tyreek Hill out there. He wasn't going to get past that defense. That was DOA. But you did it twice. You let Lazard run the ball twice. I just don't. It went back again to the original point we made that all the demons from all year round all came up at the same point. And like, what is the the play to play goal? Excuse me. I got my words backwards there. What is the play to play goal of this offense? What are you actually trying to do on an individual basis? Like, can you explain to me? And in fairness, Matt LaFleur does not need to come to me and say, Brendan Dworzynski, this is why I did this play. This is why we called this play. This is why we ran this here. This is why we sequenced this play with this play. I don't deserve that, and that's fine. But I would love to have an explanation. Why would you give the ball to Allen Lazard in that situation? Lazard had an okay game receiving the ball. Mm-hmm. That was fine. They used him effectively as a receiver, and apparently it was his last game, although I'm not really surprised by that. Anyway, beside the point, it's insane to me. And goal to go, red zone, first time they had first, second, third and goal, and the runs right up the middle. It's just uncreative. It's stale. I don't know who to blame. I'm with you. I don't know who it is who's been coming up with the red zone plays, whether it's LaFleur, Stenavich, Clemens, someone else, Rodgers himself. I don't know if there are checks that he's not supposed to be checking out to, but he is. I don't know if he's overruling Matt LaFleur. We've got some comments going on in the YouTube, and I love the discussion going on. We're monitoring here as it rolls by while we're talking. I don't know who is overruling who is coming up with these decisions. I just know that it cannot survive like this. And we saw that this year, and it didn't survive. It was dead on arrival. It was toast. And Dawn brings this up in the YouTube comments as well. And Matt, to your point about Nathaniel Hackett, Matt LaFleur said on Monday he's thought about it. He thought, yeah, I'd be open to bringing him back. We know that Hackett and Rodgers have a good relationship. I don't know what that looks like with Adam Stenavich being there as your offensive coordinator right now. Do you bring Hackett back as co-OC, new quarterbacks coach? I have no idea. And in fairness, the red zone wasn't all that great either last year, but this is what happens when you lose in big games, is everything comes into question. And in a game where you got so much wrong, I think it's only fair to question a whole bunch of things.
100%. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I do think it's I will give them some benefit of the doubt. I do think it's a situation where it's easy to, especially after the Mike McCarthy era, it's easy to, ridicule play calling, because we had a full decade-ish of, we thought, bad play calling at times, all right? And I do think on certain situations where it's like, first and goal, you run the ball. Okay, no success there. We're going to go through a different gap with a different run fits, and it doesn't happen again. You go, 0 for 2, and now it's third down. Like, I do think there is a conversation, like, you can't necessarily get away from the run right away. I think you need to establish it and get it to work. And, like, I think it's a fine line between running the ball one time on goal to go and 2 times and then having to throw it. Like, it's as false. It's a small line. It's like if you throw the ball twice or throw the ball once and it's incomplete, it's just like, it is a tough situation to be in, because I can definitely see myself being critical during a game and taking a step back. Like, well, what if they would have thrown it there? We would have probably been equally as pissed off. So I think it's a situation, but ultimately there needs to be more creativity. Like, that's it. And your creativity can't rely on your third or fourth fastest receiver on an end around.
I was livid as soon as I saw that. Truly, like, what the hell are we doing? Why in the hell would we ever think about something like that? It drives you insane, but that's kind of how this entire season went. And while we're talking about whole season issues that reared their ugly head in this game, we do need to get to the defense here, Matt. And look, you only give up 20 points to a pretty darn good offense. And in a vacuum, that's pretty good. But again, the demoralizing drive in the second half where the other team runs and runs and runs and runs, and you can't stop it, and they burn off a ton of clock, and then they eventually punch it in to take the lead, extend the lead, whatever it is. We saw that a bunch. Washington, the Lions the first time, the Jets, the Giants. We saw it in all those games that I mentioned earlier. And the inability to take the ball away. And we saw the way Jared Goff was throwing the ball at the start of the game. There were certainly opportunities to recover a fumble. He did have the ball knocked out once. I think it was Jaron Reed who got to him, who knocked the ball out, if I remember correctly. Reed played pretty well at the end of the year, to be honest with you. But you didn't generate enough pressure when you probably could have knocked the ball out a couple of times. You couldn't intercept a guy who was throwing ducks out there. The one deep ball he had to, I think it was Khalif Raymond, where he caught the ball. He went down at the 1 when I thought he was in. I can't believe they didn't just call him in, but whatever. That ball hung in the air forever. I could have done my taxes in the time it took for that ball to come down from the peak of its parabola. And yet they couldn't take the ball away, and they couldn't make enough stops. And is it more on the offense when you lose a game 20-16? Probably. But the defense didn't exactly do the offense a whole lot of favors in this one either, specifically in the second half. First half, I thought they were all right. Second half, though, they just got gashed and they got worn down. And that was the Lions, again, controlling the game and playing right into what Dan Campbell said early in the season he wanted to do to this Packers team.
There was a ton of times last night where I think it was like the first drive for the Lions too, where the ball's tipped and Jair almost picked it, right? Just like he almost kind of reaches back and picks it off a deflection that he wasn't covering. He was just around the area. And we talked about that last week on the show. It was just like, can you continue to replicate, the ball's going your way or creating these turnovers? And I said, more or less, it's sometimes the football gods are in your favor and you can keep, driving to the ball or keep swatting a ball away or getting your hands up. But you would have thought a couple of those would have gone their way last night. Really, like just the way, you think back to Jared Goff and some of the horrendous throws he had, skipping stuff down in the dirt. Every single, I thought, throw was, a basket catch or a guy's trying to get his fingertips under without it hitting the ground. It was constantly, we're getting, stuff reviewed, whether it was not challenged, but just scrutinized on replays. And that, I don't know. I thought they could have forced a couple turnovers, but ultimately, like, they weren't playing aggressive enough. That's really what it comes down to. You can't get pressures. You only had one sack. Devontae Wyatt's got the sack. Edge pressure, you mentioned we only had 2 pressures. Like, it was non-existent. PBUs were far and few between, which was, Savage had the really nice one on that out route that he jumped. But it's just the defense tenacity wasn't there. I didn't really see a whole lot of guys playing with some swagger other than like Quay Walker. He was filling the holes really, really well. I just think, I don't know what the fix is for this defense. We'll talk about it a little bit later on some of the comments LaFleur had, but yeah, fine. This was not the game to have your, a bounce back defensive performance and bounce back to how you've been all year, get back to your old habits, because the way it had been going the last 4 games was pretty optimistic going through, week 18 and into the playoffs. So that was tough. That was tough to see. I do wonder how, again, if we had another pass rusher, Rashawn Gary, if they had someone else that could have made some plays. I saw Preston Smith wasn't there on a couple third downs last night, which was concerning to me as well. But at the end of the day, it's not a winning brand of football. Yes, you're keeping them out of the end zone a little bit more, but having to, withstand a 12, 13 play drive, not forcing turnovers, not sacking them when they're Jared Goff was almost giving him the ball multiple times. You got to be able to take advantage of his miscues on the road and in some poor weather conditions.
The way you just phrased it, I think, is 100% perfect. It's not winning football. It's just not. There's, again, when I talk about play-to-play offense, what is your play-to-play goal defensively? Like, what do you actually believe you can accomplish if you are not able to get to the quarterback and knock him down, and you're not able to take away the ball, and you're not able to make stops on third down? Like, what do you actually think you're going to end up accomplishing in that situation? And I know that, like, Joe Barry's notes do not say, don't make stops on third down, don't generate I know that's the goal, but what you're doing is not working. And maybe it is just the personnel, right? I mean, maybe it is the fact that Rashawn Gary is hurt. Kingsley Enagbare, I think I've been pronouncing it wrong based on how he introduced himself on the Sunday Night Football introductions. I think I might be pronouncing it wrong. I'm not entirely sure. Kingsley Enagbare, that's the best I know how to say it. It's just that he's a rookie. Preston Smith is a better number 2 pass rusher than he is a number 1. They were doing a good job on the interior, and the Lions have a good offensive line. In fact, they have a really good offensive line, really young offensive line in a couple spots too. But you got to be able to get pressure, man. You've got to be able to generate pressure somehow. Leave your corners on islands more and send more blitzes. I don't know what it would end up taking in that situation. And I'm not a defensive coordinator. It's not my job. I'm not paid to come up with these schemes, but I also know when it's not working. The whole world knows when it's not working. You've got to figure out a way to make it work. Taking the ball away. You can't really predict that because it's such a volatile statistic, one of the most volatile statistics, but you got to take it away sometimes. Even one last night maybe changes the fortunes in the game, or at least gives you another chance to get the ball back, or one more third down stop at the end of the game. Maybe you end up getting one last chance to at least bomb the ball down the field to Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, and you hope for pass interference at some point. I mean, there's a couple different ways that we could have ended up seeing one more Packers chance, and they just didn't come. And you're right. You're 1,000,000% right. It's just not winning football, and that's the big concern. I'm actually I'm gonna call it an audible here. We're gonna go can here. I wanted to adjust the rundown. This is a little inside baseball if you're watching or listening. But originally we had this as our last topic, but I figure it actually makes sense to get to now. Matt LaFleur says during his press conference on Monday, I don't want to use the word postmortem. I don't really think that's appropriate given what's happened in the NFL the past week. But it was his end of season recap. We're sad and we'll do the best we can in the future press conference. And he said he anticipates that Joe Barry will be back to be the defensive coordinator for the Packers next year. So, Matt, I will ask you, what are your thoughts about Joe Barry probably getting a third year as the Packers defensive coordinator?
Strange that he would comment on it and even give an answer. It kind of reminds me actually like the Jim Leonard thing for Wisconsin Badgers fans, where he's like, yep, decides he's going to come back, and then 4 days later changes his mind at the end of the season. It's like, you don't have to say anything. You can give them a politically correct answer. You can give them sort of, coach speak. You can do whatever you want. You don't even have to say, we can just say, we are, I will have my exit interviews throughout the season or the end of the season. Just come up with something that was like, hey, we're going to assess, make sure we have the best coaching staff possible, just like we want to make sure we have the best roster. But to actually say, like, you anticipate Barry to return is somewhat shocking to me. I do think, I do think Joe Barry can do a better job with the talent he has. I think there's been signs of improvement. I think a lot of fans are pretty pissed off just from the all the talent that's there, free agency, first round picks, and it's like this is the product you're rolling out. I do think some of that, they mentioned on the broadcast last night, and they said just like the way, sometimes the way the offense plays, it puts the defense in a pretty shitty situation. Rodgers basically having his worst season of his career. There's other contributing factors to that, bad special teams, et cetera, but I do think it's tough to get, this would be Joe's, third year then coming up next year? Is that
just
right?
Finished year 2.
2 years does seem like a short leash on a guy. That seems extremely extreme. But it's like the other thing too is like they talked about that star position for Joe Barry's defense, right? The Jalen Ramsey position, that nickel backer, and they have yet to really find a guy to play that. It's kind of been a carousel, if you will, of who that guy is. You would think at this point through 2 seasons you would have found that guy, Joe. You would have advocated, you would have pounded your fist, in free agency or second or third round of a draft, like be able to go get a guy. That doesn't happen. So it's like, well, if this is really the piece that you're missing on this defense, that's one thing. If, it takes maybe up until next year to get another pass rusher to supplement Zadarius Smith, you weren't prepared for that. You knew you were going in at a weak spot with him. Then Rashawn goes down. That's another thing. But like that aside, like there's just too much talent for it not to be good. And I think a lot of people, other than like all the capital that they have in it, first round picks, free agency, etc. I think the big thing is just like his track record before with the Detroit Lions and the Rams, being not the best defense, especially with the Lions. I think that's a big thing that people want to just, have 1 foot in, 1 foot out for Joe Barry and throw him out the window at some point. So I'm okay with it one more year, but there has to be significant improvements like next year. Like you have so much talent, dude. There's no reason this should be bad. But I'm not too optimistic based off what the secondary looks like going into next year. I think there's going to be a lot of changes there, especially the safety group. We've talked about that a bunch. I don't know what changes need to be made, but something needs to change, maybe with some either it's if you're going to keep Joe Barry and that's going to be your guy, before you got to make another change, whether it's, specialist guys, D-line, linebacker, secondary coach, obviously Jerry Gray is more likely staying. Or a couple different personnel guys to shake it up, but ultimately, like, don't throw the guy out there as a lame duck going into his third year and basically fire a midseason or something crazy. Like, that would be insane. So give him an opportunity if you want to bring him back. But I was surprised to see that LaFleur actually said, yeah, he anticipates bringing him back. That was shocking to me.
Generally speaking, I would agree with you that you need to give coaches and schemes time. You need time for them to be able to take hold and get their footing, and everybody knows the system and it comes naturally. A college example of this, the head coach at Oklahoma, Brett Venables, when he was at Clemson, he was known for being one of the best defensive coordinators. Hell, he was the highest paid coordinator in the country for a while. He was known for his great defense. He was a truly great defensive coordinator. It took a couple of years after he left OU as a coordinator to go to Clemson for it to really sink in. They had some real major growing pains, but once it took hold, that defense was humming for Clemson throughout their best years just a couple of years ago. Now at Oklahoma, their defense was awful after he returned as head coach and obviously installed his own defense. But it's a similar principle. Hey, this takes some time. It takes a recruiting cycle or two for this to finally take hold. I think in the NFL, coaches are often fired too quickly, and you need to give at least a couple of years so that someone can get their system in place, unless you end up with a Hackett in Denver or an Urban Meyer in Jacksonville when it's just clearly a disaster. Mm-hmm. Here is why, though, I can't follow through with that for Joe Barry in particular. And Ross Uglum from Packer Report put this on Twitter on Monday. Joe Barry's defenses in his career, 6 seasons as a defensive coordinator, 30th in DVOA, 31st in DVOA, 21st and 25th, 22nd and 20th. His defenses, in terms of the Football Outsiders DVOA metric, have never been better than 20th in the NFL. That was this season. Scoring defenses, twice in Detroit, last in the league. 15 and 16 in Washington, 19th and 18th in the NFL. Last year and this year in Green Bay, 10th in the NFL in scoring D last year, 17th in it this year. Like, there's never been, like, greatness with this. Like, Nathaniel Hackett, when he got hired by the Broncos, he had come off a real hot streak with Green Bay and how good the offense had been the last couple of years. His previous stints as an offensive coordinator had not gone especially well. The Jacksonville offenses, when he was there, they were not exactly, whoa, hold on now, Blake Bortles looks like the next Joe Montana. No, they weren't exactly great, but he looked good when he came to Green Bay. Barry hasn't even had that. He didn't even have, okay, well, in this one spot, he looked good for a brief period of time. That's never been there for him. So I just don't know what we should expect to be different. Because if you're Matt LaFleur, I imagine you're seeing that things are wrong here and they need to be fixed. If they just think it's talent, that's worrisome because the Packers have invested so much free agent money and so much draft capital in defensive pieces. But if it's more than just that, then unless you're going to fire a bunch of assistants and position coaches and quality control guys, I don't know what we can actually expect to change here next year. So I wouldn't have done this. I think I've made my stance on Barry pretty clear. I think most people at this point have. I understand trying to keep continuity, and I do think that's extremely important. But good Lord, man, this defense has been hard to watch for a couple of years under Barry, and I don't know why we should expect anything different if it's going to be pretty much running it back with the same staff next year. Before we get out of here, was there anything else that Rodgers brought up after the game or that LaFleur brought up after the game or even on Monday that really jumped out to you? I know Rodgers' comments after he walked off the field and had that emotional moment with Randall Cobb, I know that has made or generated a lot of headlines and a lot of attention.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff, man. I mean, just like watch the end of the game, and it's kind of just eerie. You're watching him and Randall Cobb go off the field. Previous to that, you're watching him dap up a bunch of guys, and the Jameson Williams thing is like, holy hell! Like he's going to hang on to this one jersey. He talked about that in the press conference last night, which I ended up listening to this morning, and basically said I think he kind of tiptoed around the answer, but he mentioned like, some of these games are more important than others. This isn't just like a fly by the seat of your pants game. Week 18, divisional game at Lambeau, Sunday Night Football, you can win to get in. Like, and he kind of tied a bow on it, said like sometimes he gifts these to people, whether it's friends, families, coaches, whatever. So I was like, okay, there might be something there. The one that really stuck out to me and it made me, I was just had a weak moment last night. I'm like, I'm not going to watch the LaFleur one or wait till Monday. Not going to watch the Rodgers one and wait till Monday. And I saw it popped up on my Twitter timeline. It was still live, and it was like 15 minutes in. And I clicked it, and they literally asked him, I don't remember who it was, if it was, I don't remember which beat reporter it was, but they basically asked, if this is your last time at Lambeau, like what will you miss the most? And he welled up, took a sip of his water to kind of gather his thoughts, and he kind of made a joke towards about 6 or 7 beat reporters, mentioning, he'll miss this about them, this about him or her, and ultimately he'll miss the players and the fans, and he walked off. And that was tough to digest, dude. Like, especially like the fact that I was not gonna listen to that on Sunday night, and then I go ahead and just have a weak moment, and that was the last one of the last couple of things. I'm like, geez, like that is tough. Like, so at this point, like, I don't know. It was difficult for me to stomach some of the stuff he was saying. LaFleur, a lot of coach crap. Like, he was just kind of upset and pissed and just kind of, discussing about what Quay Walker did, Rasul, like just typical, coach speak. Nothing too crazy. I think he was a little bit heated up and kind of pissed off from the loss. But ultimately, really the Rodgers, like the last minute, 2 minutes of his press conference was kind of eye-opening, and just from going to that to starting at the end of the game and him walking off with Cobb, it was a lot to kind of take in the last 45 minutes before going to bed last night.
I still think he's going to come back, and we're going to talk about this next week. Our show next week is going to be kind of a year in review, look ahead to the storylines this offseason, make some predictions about who might be back, what some of the approaches will be for the offseason. So we will be back another week after this one if you're listening or you're still watching here at the end of the show. But I will say, the moment when he walked off with Cobb, I thought, okay, this is powerful. Like this is making me feel things that I wish I wasn't really feeling right now. And then the comments during the press conference where he talked about how he's going to miss the fans and the guys and all that made me think, all right, this seems kind of like someone who is opening the door to retirement. But by the same token, he has said so much stuff over the last couple of years that would lead you to believe one thing, and then it ends up being something else. And no, that's not a commentary about anything COVID related. I just mean that he drops a lot of hints, or, I just think he's moody. Like we had similar-ish comments after the loss to the 49ers last year. And I just think he was emotional after the win. And I think it was smart when he said, I'm going to take a few days, let the emotion from this fade, separate from that, and then go from there. I won't hold the Packers hostage, and that I think everybody would appreciate that. That's what stood out to me the most. And from LaFleur, it's the Joe Barry comments on Monday, which we've obviously already gotten to in depth. I don't know. I don't know exactly how long it's going to take for him to figure this out. I know people are going to talk about it nonstop. My piece of advice is, if you are the type who says, I hate this drama and there's too much of it, yada, yada, just remember there is a little red X in the corner of your web browser. There is if you have an old iPhone, there's a button, or you can slide up, and I don't know exactly what the command is on an Android. There are ways to close Twitter. There are ways to shut yourself out. You don't have to turn on Undisputed. You don't have to turn on First Take. You can avoid the discourse if you want to. You do not have to be a part of it. And it's just my one piece of advice if you're already complaining about Aaron Rodgers drama this offseason. But that's the one thing that stood out. And if that was it, that's going to be a very powerful picture of him walking off the field with Randall Cobb. And if he's back, then I let's ride one more year. And absolutely we'll hope for the best, even though this season pretty much ended with the worst. Although, Matt, before we go, we don't have any more games to preview. Very sadly, I was hoping that we could preview another, beat down to the 49ers. I told a buddy of mine who shot me a text during the game right before halftime. Right after halftime, he said, I want the Packers to win more than anything, but we are going to get destroyed next week by the 49ers if we make it in. And I was like, yeah, this is like in college basketball when a mid-major wins their conference tournament and they go crazy. We're going to the NCAA tournament. We're going to the NCAA tournament. And then you get Duke in the first round. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're just happy to be here. And I really felt that way. Like this was the big one for me. Like, just get in. You say you got to the playoffs, whatever happens there, it's house money at that point. Unfortunately, didn't even get to that point. But even though we don't have any games to preview, I did want to get to a little significant to some before we wrap up the show today. The Super Bowl is a few weeks away. It's just about a month away, just over a month away at this point. It's on February 12th. We've got the odds, courtesy of the FanDuel Sportsbook, for the odds to win Super Bowl 57. We'll put them up on the screen right now. We'll read out some of the key ones to you if you're listening to the podcast version. Chiefs are the favorites right now. They're at plus 330, followed by the Bills at plus 420. The Eagles are plus 500. It's tied with the 49ers. So both of the top NFC teams are plus 500. Then you've got the Bengals at plus 750. Everyone else is a much longer shot after that. The longest one being the Seahawks. They're plus 8,500. Matt, whether it is your actual pick to win the Super Bowl or whether it would be your gambling value pick to win the Super Bowl, who do you like from this list?
I tried to actually do there was a playoff generator earlier, and I tried to actually do it. Ended up with the Chiefs and the Eagles. So didn't really like the way I did that, just going straight chalk. Now, value, 100% like the Eagles at plus 500 money. I think that's solid. I think Jalen Hurts being a little bit resting that shoulder. I think that team's really good. But the favorite one I got here is Bengals plus 750. You look at the game they played on Sunday versus the Ravens. I think they have a chip on their shoulder, clearly. Relatively healthy. I think that offense is in damn good shape right now. Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, just the coolest guy ever. I really like them to get back to the Super Bowl and revenge last year. I don't necessarily like any of the other long shots. You could maybe have a conversation for the Niners there as well. Bills and Chiefs I think are a good story. I just think that AFC is a pretty tough, daunting situation there. But value wise, 100%. I like Eagles and especially the Bengals at 750.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Bengals plus 750. That would absolutely be mine. I think you could make an argument they're playing better football than anybody else right now. Their defense has been awesome. They won comfortably over the Ravens, who also look just dreadful. They didn't even get a great game from Joe Burrow when they won comfortably over Baltimore in Week 18. I love Burrow. I might rock the Burrow jersey next week even. I'm such a freaking huge fan of Joe Shiesty. So I think I might just pick the Bengals outright at this point. I think the Chiefs are really good. I think the three best teams in the NFL are all in the AFC. I think Chiefs, Bills, Bengals are your best. But right now, I wouldn't want to face the Bengals right now. I would say that much. Although, by the same token, I wish the Packers were playing anybody this coming weekend. But unfortunately, we can't always get what we want. And unfortunately, we wanted to get one more week of Packers football this year, and that went by the wayside with this week's loss to the Detroit Lions. That is not it for the final dump this year. However, Matt and I will be back next week to put a bow on this season, a big, smelly, ugly bow on what was a big, smelly, ugly season. But we'll put a bow on it. We'll look back at some of the biggest moments from the year and look ahead to some of the big storylines for the offseason as well. As always, make sure you're following Matt on Twitter. His handle is at Matt_FRA_. You can find myself at Brendan DZW. And of course, make sure you're following Game On Wisconsin across your social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well. Matt, this sucks. It sucks to not have playoff football to preview, but that's probably, as much as it hurts, probably what this team deserved this year.
100%. I am a Packers fan, but I'm also an NFL fan, so enjoy Super Wild Card Weekend, and we'll recap the season that was come next Monday.
We will talk to you then. For Matt Freilich, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. This has been the post-Week 18 edition of the Final Dump, and we'll talk to you next week to recap the 2022 Packers season.
Well, Wayne, I think this is one that Vince Lombardi and George Halas would be proud of.
You could have given me the touchdown. Then it's hard to overturn. You know what I mean?
I understand.
That was a good effort, though, wasn't it? Pretty good effort.